Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Proven and Pursuing. My name is Jason Duarte, and I'm so excited to get started on this project. Been thinking about it for a little bit, didn't know whether to pull the trigger on it or not. I was a little bit nervous, but ultimately, I honestly think this can be a huge blessing to a lot of people, and so that's honestly why I started it. And so, if you find this as a blessing to you, please integrate yourself in it, comment or just ask questions or whatever you want to do to engage. This is really for you guys and for me. The reason I'm starting Proven and Pursuing is because I actually just got on staff at Victory Bible Baptist Church in Irmo, South Carolina in December of 2025. And so I just recently got into ministry myself, and so it's just an exciting time. And then in 2026, the Lord allowed me to marry the love of my life. And so a lot of just changes have been happening in my life recently. And, there's a lot of times where we don't have answers. And there's a lot of times where we think we have to come up with our own answers. And one of the things that I've learned in my own personal life is it's not bad to ask questions. And so I just want to be able to freely open it up to any questions that anyone might have, whether it's in ministry, whether it's of certain doctrinal questions or whatever you can think of. I've been blessed, very blessed, by having someone very influential in my life, and not just one person, but multiple people in my life that have been influential, that are good, godly people and good counsel. And one of those people for me is, his name is Dr. Chris Shepler. He wrote this book right here, Forewarned and Forearmed. And he is an avid, outspoken against Calvinism. And he goes to churches and he preaches the truth of the gospel, but at the same time defending the faith and showing the errors of Calvinism. And men like him, I'm going to be bringing on this podcast, as well as my father-in-law, who is a pastor of Victory Bible Baptist Church. And we're excited to get him integrated into this as well. And just their perspective on ministry. Dr. Shepler has been in ministry, I think it's about 40 plus years, and Pastor Seidlitz has also been in ministry for now going on 15 plus years. And so I have a good heritage at this church of men that have been faithful in ministry. And so I want to ask them those questions. I want to go to them and see what it looks like to have 30 years of experience in ministry. And I'll tell you, these are some of the most humble men I have ever met. These men are hardworking and fight for truth, ultimately. And so my mission is to bridge the generational gap and to provide kind of like a roadmap for the next generation of believers and leaders. Funny enough, both Dr. Shepler and I teach Sunday school. He teaches the adult Sunday school, and I teach the young adult Sunday school. And our main theme this year is leadership. And so it's really cool to kind of be able to incorporate that in the next future leaders in our churches. And so I picked the name Proven and Pursuing because these men that I want to bring onto the podcast and to ask these questions to, I believe they've proven their time in ministry. I understand nobody is perfect, and a lot of these men are very humble and will even say that they haven't even done much. They haven't even scratched the surface. But I really, truly believe that a lot of these men have proven their time in ministry. And the pursuing part is someone like me, 24 years old, just got married, just celebrated my first month of marriage, and kind of scared to going into ministry, kind of scared to think that I have to have all the answers and I have to have all these things figured out. And so I'm pursuing the Christian walk, the race, and to be able to finish strong, ultimately. And so I believe that God has allowed men like this to be in our lives so they can help guide us. It's not to look at them and to put them off and act like they are in from a different generation. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, in our times, and people are at my age, and think that just because times are changing, that methods change, or just because times are changing, that we have to change with the times. And I can't necessarily say I agree with that. I do understand times change and everything, but I still believe that there are core values that these men have held on to, and the men before them. And so I believe that there's a lot we have to learn. I believe there's a lot that we have to, uncover in a sense. And so, just kind of want to talk to you guys a little bit about myself, just so you can get to know me. I was raised in a Christian home. My dad is Spanish pastor at Cleveland Baptist Church in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was very blessed. I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, lived there till I was about 10 years old, and then God called our family to go to Ohio. And honestly, we didn't have anyone there. We didn't know any family, but we had a loving church, Cleveland Baptist Church, and they took us in and they loved on us. And for the next 14 years of my life, I lived there, and it was just the biggest blessing. Pastor Kevin Folger at the time, and then Pastor Pete Folger as I was leaving and kind of heading out. But it was just a huge blessing, the school I went to, and just the mentors I had, the people that God had placed in my life. And so I was very blessed. I grew up in a Christian home. I the first book I ever read was probably the Bible, to be honest. And but when it comes to my testimony, it's kind of a common theme, unfortunately, in a lot of ministerial homes. And I was told that I was saved at the age of 8. And I believed it. I ran with it. I knew all the verses. I knew what I needed to say. And so for a lot of my life growing up, I had this false sense of security that I was saved, because I had told myself I knew the answers. I knew, if anyone ever asked me, if you were to die today, where would you go? And I would say heaven. And they'd say, why? And I mean, I'd read through every verse in the Romans Road, and I'd read through every verse, and or I would just quote it to them. And it got to the point where I was in high school, and we had chapels at my school on Tuesdays, and I would grab my chair from the bottom. If you could visualize it, I would grab my chair and I would hold on to it. And the Lord was just working on my heart. I can remember as a junior, that was the year I struggled with it the most. I had a lot of stuff going on at the time in terms of just deciding where to go to college, making all these different decisions, and that life is suddenly throwing at you. And it was hard, knowing that I wasn't saved, that if at any point I would have died, that I would have not gone to heaven. But the Lord graciously spared me many, many times. And I remember it was on a Wednesday night that my dad and I were at home, and we were having a argument. And I thought that as an 18-year-old, I had it all figured out. That, what did my dad know? And so I was just angry at him. I remember just being mad, and I'm usually a calm person. For those of you who know me, I'm not really someone who lashes out. It's not just in my nature to want to do that. And that was the first time I remember ever walking away from my dad in a conversation. And it was just the worst feeling in the world. But at the same time, the Lord really kind of in that moment touched my heart and said, you need to get saved. This is getting bad, and look where you're at. And so in that moment, I remember just tearing up and crying and walking back out towards my dad, and he's just seeing me there in tears. I couldn't even speak, and he just looks at me. He goes, "Are you okay?" And I told him no. I told him I wasn't saved, and the look on his face was confusion, but at the same time, my dad looked at me and he goes, "But you know what to do." And so I remember it was that night. It was on August 14th, and it was 3 days after my 18th birthday. And I just remember my dad taking me into my room. We were on my bed, and he says, "You know what to say. You know what to do. You just have to believe." And in that moment was truly the first time in my life that I had trusted Christ as my Savior. And it was the best day, and the best day ever. I mean, I tell you, when you get saved, and when the Lord saves you from, even if you hadn't lived a quote unquote wicked lifestyle, when that weight is lifted off of you, it's like no other feeling. And I just remember that night, just being so happy. I'd gone from arguing with my dad, and to now just peace. As the Bible says, that peace that passes all understanding. And it was truly a wonderful, wonderful moment. And so, I've been saved since. And moving on, I went to Bible college right after that, and kind of was not struggling with knowing the call into ministry. I knew that the Lord wanted me in ministry. I didn't know exactly what it looked like, but in my mind I thought, well, why not do a pastoral major and see what the Lord can do with that. And so I attended a college for 2 years, very good college, and I enjoyed being there. I was there with some of my closest friends, but unfortunately during that time, I allowed my wants to take over. That was the first time I was making my own, adult money, and didn't have someone telling me where to spend it or how to save it. And so I truly allowed just, aspects of college and life to consume me, and I wanted to have fun, and I wanted to be able to do all these things, and, no repercussions. And ultimately, the Lord really humbled me during those 2 years to just see the reality of where I'd gotten. And I remember that after my second year, I knew I wasn't going back. And I had talked with my dad, and I said, "Dad, I don't think ministry's for me. I don't really think it is." And then after some counsel and after talking to some people, I began to see that the reason I was in positions I was in was the decisions I had made. And I think a lot of times we need to come to the realization that, hey, I need to be accountable for my decisions. I need to be accountable for that. And I didn't want to at the time. I just wanted to throw it on, oh, well, I'm just not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And ultimately, that was just the lie that I was allowing, in my mind to say, hey, you have an out. You don't have to do this. And so I really prayed about it that summer. I actually got to intern at my home church at Cleveland Baptist, and it's like the Lord solidified, I want you in ministry after that summer. And then after that, the Lord allowed me to attend another Bible college, and went there and studied, and first semester was going great, and then I fell back into those habits. I fell back into the habits of just wanting to have fun, of wanting to make my own decisions. And ultimately, it was just a self-discipline problem that I had, and not wanting to study or thinking you could get away with only a couple hours of sleep. And I know if you're a college student watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you know exactly those sleepless nights that you justify in your mind and might say, hey, like I had to stay up this late, but in reality, you were just talking with a friend maybe, or you might have been doing something else. And so there was a lot of nights where I'd find myself just staying up really late and trying to just distract my mind from what was going on. And so, the Lord really, I want to say, was allowing me to live um, in the sense of the way I was going to go. And, but ultimately, we know that He chastens those who He loves. And I am a child of God. And ultimately, I'd built, in a sense, a house of cards of, hey, I'm doing fine, I'm doing great, this and that, when I knew in the reality I wasn't. And it all fell one day. And I remember that, I walked into the office of one of my professors, and he kind of laid it all out, everything that had happened. And I was in a very hopeless moment at that point. Didn't know what to do, didn't have the means that I needed to continue at the time, and I just remember it was the worst feeling ever, and it's just a very humbling moment, and I just remember going to my parents, and again, if you have your parents, I pray that you do. I pray that each and every one of you that might be watching this or might be listening, I hope you have your parents, and if you do, give them a hug. Love them, because ultimately they love you more than you know, more than you ever know. And those are my parents are for me. They love me so much, and I am so undeserving of them. But I just remember going to my dad and my mom, and they weren't there physically, but their words, they comforted me as much as they could and helped me out as much as they could. And ultimately, towards the end of everything, it was at the point where I was at a crossroad of making the decision of, hey, are you going to be serious, or are you going to allow these circumstances to determine the rest of your future? And it was a hard crossroad, to be honest. Like I said before, I'm a naturally keep things to myself person. I'm not very open. I wouldn't say I'm very extroverted in nature. But the Lord allowed key people in my life, key friends, and ultimately, who was my girlfriend, fiance, and now wife, to be in my life. And it has just been truly amazing. When you allow the Lord to direct your path, and when you fully trust in Him. And I don't know if whoever's listening to this, if you're struggling with that, if you don't know whether you can trust the Lord or not, if you don't know if if you're at the point where you're like, Lord, I just don't know. Look, you're not alone. You're not the only person that's ever thought that. You're not the only person. You won't be the last person. And ultimately, we just need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be honest with the Lord. One of the funniest things that I always think about is, the Lord already knows my heart. There's nothing I can hide from Him. And why not be honest with the Lord? Why allow our pride to take us to truly just, the ground? And not because anyone's pushing us there, not because anyone's holding us there. It's just ourselves. A lot of times it's just us. We don't want to admit our faults. We don't want to admit these things that we've done. But I am now in a season where the Lord is allowed me, like I said, to work at this church. I've stepped in as the assistant to the pastor, and I've just been enjoying it. There's so many different aspects of ministry that you never think about that you're going to end up doing, and you do them. And so it's just an exciting time in my life. I'm very excited. But like I said, another reason I want this podcast to be out there and to be able to provide it is because, a lot of times in college, I didn't ask questions. I thought I knew it all, or I thought I can get by without needing to know that. I can get by without doing these things or jotting that down. But now I'm stepped into ministry, and I'm like, well, where do I go with this? What do I say? What do I do? I'm leading a young adults class. What if somebody asked me about this or that? And I didn't didn't study that, or this or that. And so, I'm at a point where I want to be able to defend my faith the best I can. And I want to be able to be the best servant that I can be. I want to be the best, you know, you name it, that I can be. I know I'm not perfect and I never will be. But I believe again, God has placed people in our lives that can help us be better. That the Bible says that iron sharpens iron. And again, I don't want to be afraid to go to these men who are experienced in ministry. I know a lot of times we hear the word seasoned, that are seasoned in ministry. Many times in Bible college I heard the words, there are things that you will go through that you will never ever even hear of here at Bible college. You won't experience it here. And these people in ministry, they've experienced it. They might have done that. They might have gone through a church split. They might have gone through, a member trying to take over the church, or you name it. There could be countless things that they have gone through that I wouldn't have the answers to, or someone who just came out of Bible college might not have the answers to. And so, I want to be able to ask those hard questions, ask those questions that maybe a lot of people don't want to ask. There's a lot of topics that I want to cover, ultimately with Dr. Shepler himself. Like I said before, I want to go over his book. It's called Forewarned and Forearmed, and it's preparing for battle against the errors of Calvinism. And, there's just so much there in and of itself. I've just been reading through his book recently and just trying to do the best I can to study on the topic. And there's so many different questions and so many different people's experiences or different religions and all these things that come into play. And we ought to be able to defend the Bible, and we ought to be able to defend our faith. And so, with topics like this that are very common in our time, I want him to be able to go through and talk about his book, and kind of each chapter we'll try to take, or a couple chapters at a time, and just let him explain, those encounters he's had with maybe Calvinistic thoughts and Calvinistic, theology. And I think it would be really good to be able to kind of hear his perspective, and not only that, but his biblical backing on all of the subjects and topics that he has in his book. And if you want a copy of it, I highly suggest it. Like I said, I've been about halfway through the book at this point, and it is just very good, very insightful. I know that he works with, I believe it's the Sword of the Lord, and so if you want to get a copy for yourself, or maybe there's someone in your life that you say, hey, they're struggling with Calvinism, this would be a really good book to be able to just kind of give to them and say, hey, read through this. And so I challenge you as well, if you want to defend your faith more, if you want to learn more about the topic itself of Calvinism, again, I highly suggest getting that book. But like I said, he was founded Victory Bible Baptist Church, the church that I serve at now, and has stepped out as pastor emeritus now, and again goes around different churches to be able to again host, in a sense, many conferences on this topic right here. And so I can't wait to have him on here. I'm excited for it. Can't wait for him to get to just have an avenue to speak to younger people about just different topics, but again, especially about Calvinism and just the way that he's written this book. And so I want to ask you guys for your help as well. Now, obviously, I have ideas of what I would like to do. I have topics that I want to talk about and things I want to discuss. But if there's somebody that you know personally that, hey, this would be a really good person to interview, my pastor, or, I want to be able to connect with these men in ministry. I want to be able to expand my knowledge of just men in ministry and be able to kind of talk to them, and if it's in a reasonable time, maybe meet up and be able to host an episode with them, or maybe even just Zoom call and do it that way. And so if you guys have any questions, or you guys just have somebody in mind that you're like, hey, this person would be awesome, this pastor would be awesome to, or missionary, or, you name it, I would love to connect with you and connect with them. If you guys have questions, again, send them in. I will try my best to get to the questions. I will try my best to be able to cater to the needs that you guys might have as well. And so, um, again, I'm just excited for this. I'm excited for the next steps ahead, and I really pray that this is a blessing to some of you, and to all of you ultimately. But for those of you who listen and are willing to stick around, I really do hope this is a blessing. I know it will be to me. Again, like I said, I want to be a student when I come into these conversations. Um, I want to be able to ask questions and write things down, and just hold on to these truths that these men have and that they've experienced. Like I said, I know they're not perfect, and many of them will be humble and say, like, I wish I could have done more. I wish I could have had more time to do more for the Lord. But ultimately, a lot of us have time. A lot of us have those, we're in our younger years, we're youthful, we can go out and do these things that, you hear so many times. And the pastors that I was under at the Bible colleges that I attended, they all the time would talk about, this pastor from such and such place is 70 years old and he's getting ready to retire, but there's no one to fill his spot. And that's just so sad to hear, that there's so many open voids of leadership in terms of ministry. And so I pray, if this encourages somebody, if you're called to ministry, if the Lord's pricking on your heart that, hey, he wants to use you, be a willing vessel. Ultimately, there's nothing like serving the Lord. And I know that, not full-time ministry is not for everyone. It is not. But I do know that the Lord, wants to use many of us. And so I pray that, your heart would be open to that. And maybe through listening to this, maybe the Lord, can confirm with you that, hey, ministry is for you. But if not, again, you're more than welcome to ask questions and just be involved with us. And I'm just super excited. I'm going to kind of tentatively have a schedule of when episodes will be dropping. We kind of are right now in the process of kind of gathering our thoughts and gathering times that we can do things. And so I'm just going to do my best to be able to kind of explain that to you and be able to give you kind of those guides to when it will be available. As of right now, I'm just going to be strictly staying on YouTube, just as right now it's the easiest avenue for me. And so in the coming months, hopefully I can work out to where I can do more. But again, I am very excited, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this first episode, kind of getting to know me, kind of getting to know what's going to take place, but then ultimately being able to just kind of launch from here and see what the Lord has for us. And so, again, I thank you so much. If you want, go ahead and subscribe. I have it on Instagram. Follow it at Proven and Pursuing. And who knows, maybe at 100 followers, we might do a giveaway or something. And so we'll talk about it, and we'll see what can happen. And so, again, just thank you for tuning in, and I pray that this was a blessing for you. And so you guys have a great rest of your day.